So what we're going to do now, if I've lost you kind of a little bit, kind of come back to me, kind of get refocused for just this last little bit, because we're going to do is we're talking about contemporary perspectives on personality. And so this is really what's going to best set us up for talking about psychological disorders and understanding how we think about personality currently. And you'll see how it kind of builds a little bit on some of the thought processes we had that we just talked about. We'll also see how it starts to become kind of distinct and a little bit more relating personality to observable behaviors. So what we see is that Gordon Allport, one of the key trait theorists, decided that Freud really overvalued these unconscious motives and undervalued kind of real observable personality styles and traits. And this is not the first time we've seen this. When we talked about kind of developing the field of psychology developing, at one point it was about these unconscious processes. Then it changed more to behaviorism, making observations. We see the same kind of thing happen within trait theory of personality. And we talk about trait theory, what we're talking about here is a trait as being an enduring quality that makes a person tend to act a certain way. Okay, so you might say this person is honest or shy or hardworking. It's an enduring quality that makes a person tend to act in a certain way. So if we had more time, or maybe as you're studying and thinking about these concepts, you could list out traits. You could list out certain characteristics about you, these qualities, that then define who you are and predict that you're going to act in a certain way. So if you're honest, if that's one of your traits, then throughout different situations, you should continue to be honest. Okay? When given opportunities to cheat, you don't. You make sure that you correctly answer things. Same thing with hardworking. You've developed this trait, then you should see across situations, across multiple times, that you work hard on something, you put in a lot of effort. And according to the trait theory of personality, and this is what we'll focus on, is that to understand who we are, we have to understand that we're made up of a collection of traits. Okay, so these collection of traits are these behavioral predispositions that they argue can be identified and measured. Okay, so again, here's where we're starting to get at this idea that we want to be able to evaluate, we want to be able to measure things. Understanding unconscious processes that Freud suggests are not measurable things. We can't evaluate those. But we can measure trait personalities. You're going to see how we do this. And the thought process behind trait theories is that we can say who we are based on a collection of these traits. So if I wanted to, if we had more time, I could give you a survey with a list of traits, and you could rate how much you agree with these traits, how much these traits characterize you. And I could take all these collections of traits, put them together, and that could make up who you are. And what makes us distinct is that our collections of traits, my collections of traits, are likely to be different than your collection of traits. And because of that, that's how trait theorists think about personality. That's how they think about how you develop and be who you are, how you develop these kind of overall thoughts, behaviors, these cognitions are the function of these traits all coming together to work together to create these different outcomes. And what we see with this trait theory of personality is it works towards what we call the Big Five theory of personality. Okay, so let's talk about what that is, because you'll see a direct demonstration of how all these traits come together to define who we are, all these observable personality styles and traits. Now, the Big Five personality originally began with only thinking about two dimensions. So Eysenck, as he was thinking about these personality traits, felt that people really varied on two dimensions, whether the trait was stable or unstable, and whether the person was introverted or extroverted. Okay, so stable or unstable. Stable meaning that this is something that's rather consistent about the person. Okay, unstable meaning it's kind of something that is a passing experience. It's a passing trait where it maybe is something that happens in one particular moment, but it's not there all the time. You guys may be more familiar with this idea of introverted, extroverted. So extroverted, kind of more outgoing, social, you derive kind of energy from others, versus introverted, where they're kind of more focused on themselves. They're a bit more kind of passive and quiet. And what you can see here is that Eysenck said, well, hey, we can think about these personality traits by putting them on this kind of chart here. And so you might say a trait such as excitable means the person's more extroverted, more outgoing, and it's a bit more unstable, meaning that, you're not always excited. But something like being carefree or lively is still an extroverted trait, but it's more stable. It's something that's consistent about you. Okay, so if you're going to go out with friends, you're lively there. If you're in a classroom, you're jumping in and giving answers, being really kind of active there. Introverted, again, they're kind of more focused inward, Again, we have introverted kind of characteristics that are unstable, such as being moody or anxious. We also have kind of introverted characteristics that are more stable. So you might say someone's kind of calm or even tempered. Okay, it's kind of, again, this trait. Basically what Isaac says, we're kind of made up of these two dimensions. We can assess our personality based on kind of how we fall on both of these. Okay, so are you demonstrating traits that are kind of more stable, they're consistent over time, and they're kind of more social and outgoing, or some other combination? Now, researchers, as they develop ideas, will go through different techniques, including different statistical techniques. And what they'll do is they'll try to think about the best way to assess these outcomes. And this is where you always want to be critically evaluating how researchers are thinking about their measures, thinking about their outcomes. And what researchers felt is that two dimensions wasn't sufficient. But rather what we see now, when we talk about personality, is this idea of the big 5 personality factors. Okay, so this is where we're going to lock into this overall idea. This will be kind of a focal point going forward. So spend a little bit of time with it, and I'll pause at the end to see if you have questions. Okay, so currently cross-cultural research and theory supports this idea that we have 5 factors. And cross-cultural is important because it shows that these 5 factors are characteristic of kind of everyone as a whole. And these 5 factors revolve around this idea of conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, openness, and extroversion. So let's go ahead and start kind of defining these. When we talk about these, okay, we can start first with conscientiousness. So someone high in conscientiousness is someone who's self-disciplined. They have a careful pursuit of delayed goals. Okay, so you guys are demonstrating a high degree of conscientiousness, self-discipline, because you're here, you're pursuing that delayed goal of doing well in the class. If you think about this, doing well in this class is then part of a larger delayed goal of doing well overall to getting your college degree. So someone who's conscientious is being careful. They're thinking about their ultimate goals. They're taking the steps that they need to. They're very forward thinking. They have kind of this self-regulation that helps them be successful. Agreeableness is someone who demonstrates agreeableness is someone who's helpful, trusting. They demonstrate this high degree of friendliness. So this is someone that while you're interacting with them, they want to make sure the interaction goes smoothly. They're willing to kind of help you out. They're willing to trust you, kind of, do the things that you're asking them of. They're really focused on making sure it's a smooth interaction. Okay, so I have a brother-in-law who's great, but I will say he's low in the trait of agreeableness. Okay, and part of the reason I say this is that when you talk with him, if he disagrees with you, he just tells you. He's not worried about, how it might affect your thinking, your feelings. He just basically tells you how it is. And it's a refreshing thing, but you say that on this dimension, he'd be lower on. Neuroticism is this idea of individuals' levels of anxiety, insecurity, or emotional instability. Okay, so it kind of maps on to that kind of unstable characteristics that we were just talking about in Eisenach's mapping. And so the idea here is that this is someone who's unsure about things. They're always kind of worried. They have this emotional instability where they're moody. They might feel positive at one point, but start to feel more negative at others. They don't feel that they have secure relationships, secure attachment with others. They're just not quite sure how things are going to work. Openness is this idea of flexibility, nonconformity, and variety. I would say that openness is maybe the weaker of the big 5 in terms of what it predicts and how it's assessed. But the idea here with openness is it's this idea of can you be adjusting to situations? Okay? Can you non-conform, do things different from others? Do you want variety? Do you want change? Going back to Big Bang Theory, we would say Sheldon is the epitome of being low in openness. Okay, so he has zero flexibility. The temperature has to be the same. There has to be a routine down to the minute. He had to have meals in a certain order, so different restaurants he ordered over the course of the week. He was very low in openness. Okay, you did see over the course of the show that personality trait changed a little bit, but still overall, he was very kind of low in flexibility. And lastly, the last characteristic here is extroversion. And extroversion is drawing energy from others, kind of being sociable. Okay, so do you want to be around others to kind of recharge? Do you like interacting with others, feeling the energy, that sociability with others? Okay, so this is where you might see memes of saying, introverts help your extrovert friends out. They're not doing well. Okay, the joke in that is that introverts are okay because they kind of draw more energy. They do well kind of being on their own, but extroverts draw that energy. They want that sociability. They want that connections with others. Now, this is a helpful mnemonic over on the left here, so I'll point it out. In terms of remembering each of these big 5 traits, you can spell out canoe. I spell ocean, that's another one. I'll say that every time I present this, I use one or the other. So I always still have to use that mnemonic as I talk about these different traits. Okay. Let me add one last piece as we talk about these traits, because it gives us to a great stopping point, is that when we talk about these big five, again, we don't talk about as individual traits necessarily characterizing someone, but we think about them more as a collection of these traits, the collection of how someone is over these big five. And we can take a dog, for instance, and think about their personality traits across these different dimensions. So a dog is low in conscientiousness. Dog is more disorganized, careless. It's definitely impulsive. So the adage of the dog running off for that squirrel. But a dog is highly agreeable. So it's trusting. It trusts you. It wants to interact with you. It's soft-hearted. It can be helpful and kind of be reassuring for you. So you see some therapy dogs, especially, they might say they're high in agreeableness. In terms of neuroticism, we might say dogs are maybe in the middle. They might be a little more anxious or insecure at certain points, but they also can kind of see themselves as kind of being calm. Might depend on the dog. Maybe if you have a smaller dog, you might say they're more anxious. Dogs are low in openness. Okay, so they want that routine. Okay, they might even try to remind you of their routine if you haven't fed them at 7 o'clock exactly. They might come up and start kind of nosing you to be fed. So they're low in openness, but they're high in extroversion. And they're very sociable, fun-loving, affectionate. They want to be around others. Okay, so I know Lily, our dog, constantly follows Katie because she wants that affection. She's attached to Katie. And so again, we can take these big five traits, look at them together. This is how we start to then define someone's personality. So this gives us kind of the foundation of understanding personality traits and trait theory before we'll move into things on Thursday and talking about person, situation, controversy, kind of expanding out to other ways we think about personality. But with that being said, any kind of questions over anything that we've covered before we adjourn for today? So if you're good, you can also let me know that as well. All right, guys. I appreciate the feedback. Looks like we're doing well. Hopefully everything's clear. Again, you can review this. I'll get it posted on YouTube. If there's some particular section you didn't quite get, you can go back to that. Otherwise, if you have questions, things for me, don't hesitate to contact me, office hours, email, anything along those lines. Otherwise, please make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. Have a good week until Thursday. I'll see you then when we'll pick up talking about personality. Okay, so bye, everyone.